Evening, everybody. This presentation on Hampi needs a little bit of preamble. Last year at the library subcommittee, we were discussing whether we can make a trip to Hampi. And then I was requested that if I can gather together a few slides and a few lines on the history on Hampi. And I must confess that I have gathered so much of information on Hampi, half of which I didn't know about. And it's really very interesting and extremely neglected World Heritage Site, just north of Bangalore. So we are planning a trip, I'll come to that later on, but let us take you through my presentation, first of which will be a brief history on Hampi, and then I'll come to the architecture of Hampi, which is of interest to everybody. Hampi was the capital of last great Hindu kingdom of Vijayanagara. Now Hampi, people think that it was a medieval city, but actually it existed right from the prehistoric times. And it actually flourished from the 14th to 16th century, and all the travelers came to India during that time. So they spoke and they wrote about Hampi during that period of time. And as usual, it was discovered by an ICS officer, Robert Sewell, who wrote a seminal book on Hampi, and then everybody followed suit, taking information from Robert Sewell's book. It was completely destroyed by the Islamic invaders in 1565, and then it died a natural death like all other Indian cities. Like I said, the region was inhabited from Neolithic times, and there are, proofs available with the archaeological survey. There are shards of pottery, drawings on walls in different caves found in this area, and edicts of King Ashoka, right from 2nd century BC, have also been found in Bellary, which is a town close by. This is Hampi. The river that you see in front is Tungabhadra. It ends in a very large lake called Tungabhadra Lake. Interestingly, it was known as Pampa Tirtho in 689 CE. This was the most important deity. Pampa actually was Durga, and the way they worshipped Pampa and Virupaksha is Shiva. So the story of Pampa getting married to Virupaksha is similar to the way Durga, daughter of Moinak, gets married to Shiva. So Shiva, initially Virupaksha temple, I'll show you, was Vishnu temple, but gradually it was changed to the Shiva temple. Briefly, if you look at the maps of ancient India, we know about all these. Initially we know that there were small kingdoms all over central India, and we had this Pala kingdom in Bengal, and we had the caliphates in Afghanistan and the Middle East. But in the southern part of India, the southern kingdoms were always there, and they were really flourishing. Not as much as Vijayanagara, but they were flourishing kingdoms. This was this map of 30 BC. In 1000 BC, we see that Islamic Ghori, Muhammad Ghori and the Ghori Sultanate, they have come in. The Sena dynasty is there in Bengal, and they have Solankis, Yadavas, Kakatiyas, Hoysala, all those small kingdoms in the south. They were flourishing. They were making money, they were quite rich, but they were not very strong in warfare. They could not fight the Muslims who came from the north. And Hampi was a center of human activities right from the prehistoric times. It was a part of many kingdoms, including the Chalukyas, Rashtrakuta, and Hoysalas. We all know about them, and the Yadavas, before it became the capital of Vijayanagar. This is a map of 1320. Now, if we look at a map of 1520, when Vijayanagar was really flourishing, we can see that it is divided into several small kingdoms, of which Malwa is important. We have to remember the Malwa, which is near Ujjain actually, slightly south of Delhi, but far north of Hampi and Vijayanagar. Let us remember this area. In 1897, this is very interesting, that nobody knew about Vijayanagar, nobody knew about Hampi. It was found in France, in the National Library. David Lopez, a Portuguese scholar, was searching through many books and scriptures. Suddenly he found that in the National Library there is something called Chronicle of Bisnaga. Bisnaga is obviously a distorted version of Vijayanagara. It contained reports from two other Portuguese travelers, Nunes and Pais, about a magnificent South Indian kingdom in 16th century called Bisnaga apparently. The chronicles were then translated into English by Robert Sewell in 1900, and it was published as A Forgotten Empire, a wonderful book. They also came across, writing by Niccolo Conti of Portugal, who wrote about his experience in 1420. Then somebody called Ludovico Varthema, who wrote about the splendor of Hampi in 1504. And somebody called Federici, who wrote about the terrible devastation after the Battle of Talikota. We'll talk about Talikota in 1567, after which it was completely destroyed. Interestingly, a Russian adventurer called Nikitin had also come here and had described Vijayanagar as a cosmopolitan city. A city flourishes, like in my previous presentation I showed how Alhambra flourished. It was flourishing because it was a cosmopolitan city, and they allowed the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews all to stay together, and it increased their business and commerce. Similar things happen here. The Russian adventurer saw that the city is full of Portuguese, Italians, Persians, Russians, Chinese, and also Arab traders. And they could also follow their own religion, no bar from there. And these people called the city by its distorted name, which were Bisinagar or Bisinega. The photograph on the left shows Hampi when it was found in the middle of 19th century, full of jungle, crumbling down. And many of the structures that we see here, the top portion I'll show you in the later photographs, after apparently restoration was done, these things were completely missing. This is the famous chariot, by the way. I'll show you a photograph of that structure. This is a painting of Robert Sewell. Pais had written in his book that who can fully describe the great riches these women carry on their person. Collars of gold with many diamonds, rubies and pearls, bracelets on their arms and upper arms, girdles around their waist and anklets on their feet. Imagine the weight they had to carry. I have come across some, sculptures which are like this, so you can see the kind of ornaments that they are wearing, and you can imagine the weight they had to carry. The ruins of Hampi and Vijayanagara were finally discovered in the 1800 by a British engineer called Colin Mackenzie. And then Robert Sewell wrote that book called A Forgotten Empire. Interestingly, the story of invasion of Vijayanagar began in 1294 AD in a tiny fiefdom called Kara in North India. This is a painting of Jalaluddin Khilji, who was the Sultan of Delhi at that time. Kara was under a ruthless and ambitious Afghan prince named Garshasp Malik. We haven't heard about him, have we? But we know him. I'll come to that. He was the nephew of Sultan of Delhi, Jalaluddin Khilji. This is Jalaluddin. Jalaluddin was a mild person. He was a gentle and civilized man. And he was fond of his nephew and even married his daughter to him. But that was the beginning of the problem. All big problems, start with women, and this was a classic case. The princess was haughty and disdainful. She and her mother kept reminding Garshasp that the princess had married beneath herself and he should be grateful. A frustrated Garshasp started eyeing Delhi's Sultanate throne so that he can rise in power and status, and started planning for it. But how do you do it? You need enormous amount of money. So he needed a lot of money and started asking his friends where to get this kind of money from. He also had to fight the two sons of Jalaluddin and also bribe the chieftains of Delhi in order to become Sultan. So he came to know about the enormous wealth of the southern kingdoms, all the kingdoms. Vijayanagar was not there at that time, and took permission from his uncle to invade Malwa. Now remember, Malwa was near Ujjain, that area, which is just south of Delhi, but far, far north of Vijayanagar. He took permission from his uncle that I will go and attack Malwa, and he got the permission. But then he turned southward in a clandestine expedition towards Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar was not there, so he attacked and looted the Yadava kingdom in 1294. There was a long camel train, and these are all described by people, the travelers and the writers. And the camel train was carrying his loot of gold, silver, precious gems and silks. He also got a large number of horses and elephants. Incidentally, he also kidnapped a Yadav princess and married her. This was in 1294. On 20th July 1296, Garshasp killed his uncle, who was very affectionate. His uncle Jalaluddin was killed, and he declared himself Sultan of Delhi. This is Alauddin Khilji. This is Alauddin Khilji. And this is his cinema avatar that we have seen in Padmavat. He foiled an attempt by his mother-in-law Malika Jahan, who wanted to, bring her son and kill the son-in-law. So he defeated the mother-in-law and took the title of Alauddin Khilji. So Garshasp was Alauddin Khilji. And then he decided that he'll go to the south again, beyond the Vindhyas, because the real treasure was beyond the Vindhyas, not in Malwa. But the south was, there were tiny, kingdoms who really knew how to fight the Muslims. From 12th century onwards, the invaders were like Mahmud Ghazni and Taimur. Malik Kafur was the trusted general of Alauddin Khilji, who was in charge of his biggest military triumphs. So Malik Kafur was sent. And when Malik Kafur started looting these Hindu kingdoms, people like Amir Khusru has said in one of his writings that he returned to Delhi in 1311 with 612 elephants, 20,000 horses, boxes full of precious gems, and 96,000 moons of gold. Moon means, if you convert that, 38 lakh 40,000 kg, or let's say about 4,000 tons of gold in one expedition. The continued attacks of the Muslim invaders prompted the southern kingdoms to support the sons of a Sangama dynasty to lay the foundation of a new kingdom, because they knew how to fight back. This was the starting of Vijayanagar. Fortunately for the southern kingdoms, the Khalji dynasty faded after the death of Alauddin in 1316, and he was replaced by the Tughlaqs. There was a lot of political confusion in Delhi, and that allowed the southern kingdoms to recover their power. there was someone called Shankara Deva, the king of Devagiri, which is Daulatabad, in 1312, who decided to stop paying the tribute to Delhi Sultanate, asking for trouble. This was a small hillock on the banks of Tungabhadra, and Malik Kafur had decided to attack this place called Devagiri, and the king Shankara Deva died fighting. Even though it was a large kingdom, those of you who have read Asterix comics will remember that a small Gaulish village remained who the Romans could not conquer. So inside this Devagiri, there was a small Gaulish village by the name of Kampili, who were defiant and knew how to resist the Muslims. So they built a series of fortresses, and on one of these hills, on the banks of Tungabhadra, Anegondi Hill, Anegondi Fort was built. That was the northern bank of Tungabhadra. Malik Kafur, incidentally, was killed in Delhi during the change of power in Delhi. But the next Sultan, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, and his son, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, kept going to south. Kampila Deva was the king of Kampili, and he kept defeating Tughlaq's army, but finally he also died fighting. And the women inside the fort all committed sati. And these Muslim invaders were extremely cruel. They were not happy with only defeating the enemy, they had to prove a point. Ibn Battuta, who came from Morocco, in his travelogue he has written about the cruelty of Sultan Muhammad when he defeated Kampila Rai. Kampila and his 11 sons were forcibly converted into Islam, but this alone did not satisfy him, writes Ibn Battuta. The prisoner was taken to his harem, where the women insulted him and spat on him. Then the prisoner was skinned alive. His skin was torn off his flesh, and the flesh was cooked with rice and sent to his wife and children. The leftovers were given to the elephants, but the elephants refused to eat that. So what did he do? He ordered the skin to be stuffed with straw and exhibited that throughout his kingdom. Now, among the prisoners taken from the Anegondi fort were two sons of a local chieftain called Sangama. So this was starting of the Sangama dynasty. These two brothers were Harihara Rao and Bukka Rao. In school we have studied that Harihara and Bukka, they were twin brothers, but they were not. They were 5 brothers actually, and Bukka apparently was the 3rd or 4th. Harihar was the eldest. They were small children. They were kidnapped by the Sultan, taken to Delhi and forcibly converted into Islam. By 1320, all the southern kingdoms were fighting with each other. When the Delhi Sultans came back to Delhi after winning in south, they left behind something like a mayor who would look after the entire south, the governor. Malik Muhammad was one such Muslim governor who was really unable to control the infighting, and they requested Delhi that please replace me. Please send someone else who knows the south, who knows the language, knows the terrain. So Muhammad bin Tughlaq chose these two converted brothers, Harihar and Bukka, to become the new governors of the south. Now in the south, we all know about the Sringeri Mutt, which was already extremely rich, lot of money with the Sringeri Mutt. Shankaracharya Vidyaranya, he thought about creating an empire to preserve and propagate the ancient Vedic traditions and to withstand the onslaughts from the Delhi Sultanate. So he convinced the two brothers to renounce Islam and to reconvert to Hinduism and establish a Hindu kingdom. Easier said than done. Two young boys forcibly taken to Delhi, forcibly converted to Islam, comes back to South, and in those areas, those days, people were very conservative. They would not accept these two boys to be reconverted into Hinduism. They accepted only because the Sringeri Mutt actually told all these people that these are the two brothers who will re-establish the strong southern kingdom here. And he loaned money. He not only converted these two brothers, he loaned money so that these two brothers, especially Harihara, would go on a building spree. Temples and different areas, schools and stuff, bazaars. So that was the beginning of Vijayanagar as a city. So Vidyaranya placed substantial weight at their disposal to both the Sangama brothers, and the brothers celebrated their return to their ancestral faith by declaring independence from Delhi. This declaration came on Vijayadashami. So that is why even now in Vijayanagar and Hampi, Dasera or Vijayadashami is a day for big celebration. Not because of Durga Puja, because it was announced on that particular day that they are not taking Delhi as their Sultan. Harihara Rao, who was the eldest brother, was crowned as the first king of Vijayanagara. This was 1336. And then Sangama dynasty kept expanding their empire, which soon became a large empire spanning from Bay of Bengal to the Arabian Sea. Almost this area, including Goa, where the Portuguese travelers came. Very quickly, if you can go through, the dynasties, Vijayanagara was not only the Sangama dynasty. It started with Sangama, but there were several, of the Sangama, starting with Harihara, and then Devaraya in 1485, and then there was Saliva dynasty from 1485 to 1505. And then the Tuluva dynasty, which was the best period of Vijayanagar, and Krishna Devaraya, who ruled from 1509 to 1529, he actually built Vijayanagara like it is today. This was actually the golden period of Vijayanagara. These are the photographs taken around the 1850s. Like I said, Harihara and Bukka were 5 brothers. The other 3 were Kampana, Mudappa and Marappa, and they all actually stayed together, which they were very lucky in that. So Hampi at its prime was around 1500 AD, 1500 C. How does it compare with other cities in the world during that time? In Vijayanagar or Hampi, there were 3 to 5 lakh people at any point of time. So it was the second largest city in the world, larger than Delhi. It was second largest, the largest being, Beijing, Rome and Istanbul. So this was the status of Hampi in those days. Beijing was around 6 lakh population, Rome was about 6.5. Istanbul in 1550, they had a census. Istanbul was 6.6 lakhs. There was a small sultanate in Malabar down south, but Bukka, who was the third brother of Harihar, he completely destroyed the Malabar sultanate. Then came Harihara II, 1377 to 1404, and he expanded the Vijayanagara kingdom over the entire South India. Then we had Devaraya I, and then his sons Ramchandra and Veer Vijaya. And there were, a series of successions which went on. But their real hero was Krishna Deva Raya, who was from 1509 to 1529. He was a very popular leader. Many travelers have described that he was not a very tall fellow. He was short, he was slightly chubby. He had pockmarks, maybe chicken pox or whatever, on his face. But people have written down how serious he was about his exercise, his horse riding. And he would go around his kingdom, asking people what they wanted. So he was a good leader. He was a good statesman and he was a good general. He renovated old temples, built new ones, and brought thinkers, philosophers, saints, and artists and musicians to his court. He never objected to the Arabs and the Portuguese and others building their own mosques and churches there. Everybody was welcome. He even invited Sri Chaitanya for a debate. Sri Chaitanya was very famous for engaging in debates. And in those days, the main topic of debate, unlike our Bengal club, was whether God is dualistic or non-dualistic. Dvaitavad and Advaitavad, for which Chaitanya was famous. And it is written that Sri Chaitanya actually won a debate which lasted for 27 days. And he was offered vessels full of gold coin, but he accepted just 7 gold coins just for the ornaments of the deity and returned the rest. After Krishna Deva Raya, actually the decline had started. Achyuta Raya came and Krishna Deva Raya's son-in-law Rama Raya wanted to succeed him, and he was defeated in Talaikota war in 1565, and that started the decline of Vijayanagara kingdom. The problem with Krishna Deva's son and son-in-law was whoever was in, they kept on fighting. One was the son, the other one was the son-in-law. So there were two sources of power in the same kingdom. They started fighting. But Ramaraya finally killed Achyuta Raya and became the king. The first thing that he did was, he brought his own loyal men into the army and sacked all the old ones. That was his biggest mistake. And the replacement happened with the Muslim mercenaries. They were paid enormous amount of money. So they were fighting with all the southern kings, and some of them were with Ramaraya, who came with him as his new generals. When the Battle of Talikota happened in 1565, these mercenaries, they all betrayed Ramaraya because they suddenly decided they will not fight against the Muslim invaders. They have been doing it all this while. Also what happened was, there were 5 different kingdoms in Bijapur, Bidar, Birar, Ahmednagar and Golconda. They formed a syndicate because they understood that all alone they wouldn't be able to defeat Ramaraya. So they formed a syndicate and they started fighting Ramaraya. Ramaraya was defeated and thrown out. 2 of the main Muslim commanders deserted to the other side. So Ramaraya was captured and beheaded. When this was done, all the other Hindu kings who decided not to support Ramaraya, they started moving in. And they captured strategic forts and areas. And this was the downfall of Hampi after this. So just a quick take on what I have explained this far. From Delhi, initially they came to Malwa and looted Malwa area. After that, without telling the Sultan, they came down, They actually came down so much up to here and then destroyed all the kingdoms. There was small kingdom in the south which started, fighting against the Islam. Two brothers were kingdom. They were taken to Delhi. They came back as governors, and they started the Vijayanagar kingdom. But all these five, Muslim kingdoms were all here, including Golconda. Golconda is here. So they all formed a syndicate. Otherwise, they could not fight Vijayanagar. And this syndicate actually finally was able to defeat Vijayanagar. And Vijayanagar was so rich in those days, the looting was done for 6 months continuously. This is all chronicled. That the army stayed back and the looting just went on. And it completely destroyed most of the temples, most of the shrines, the shops, everything. So now what we have today is a huge ruin, a ruin of a township, which is broken into several pieces. So I can now we can come to the architecture of Hampi, which is perhaps more interesting to me. And if you look at the temple styles, the North India and East India had this style of architecture called Nagara. I mean, there was a sequence of spaces. And then south, what we see in Hampi and all those areas, this is Dravidian style of architecture. So we have a small shrine around it. We have different places for congregation, for offering, puja and stuff like that. And then we have a hybrid, which is Vesara style of architecture. And Hampi, when these were done exactly as per, Shilpa Shastra. Shilpa Shastra is a treatise on architecture and town planning. In part, it's a part of the fourth Veda, the Atharva Veda. And in Hampi, if you see the geometry and the alignment, everything was done as per the Atharva Veda. So we know a little bit about Vastu Purush Mandal. The layout of a temple was laid down exactly as a human body. The Garbhagriha is something like our head, you can imagine. Something like this. This is the Garbhagriha. Then as the other parts of the body, we have a congregation place, we have protection path, then we have other places where people can congregate, people can, eat, they can distribute the prasad. And then finally where the feet is, we have the Gopuram. The difference between the South Indian temples and the temples of North and East is that the Gopuram was the tallest structure, unlike the temples of the North. So at times people, celebrated by building the Gopuram. Many of the kings in Vijayanagar did that. The temple was built earlier, but to leave a mark, the king would come and construct the Gopuram, which was done in the case of Krishna Devaraya, or let's say KDR, a very long name. So the innermost is the Garbhagriha. This was surrounded by a production path where you go around the central part, and on top you have a tower which is Shikhar, and then an open pillared hall which is the Mandap. The larger temple complexes would have a Bhog Mandap for distributing food and for religious rituals. And there is a Natya Mandap for temple dancers and Devdasis. These are separate structures, one after the other. And South Indian temples, like in Vijayanagar and Hampi, they had something called the Amman. Like the main deity had consorts. So near the main Garbhagriha, you would have smaller temples where all the consorts had their deities. And this would be the richest areas because the consort had all the ornaments and all the jewelries. And finally, the Kalyan Mandapa for annual festivals and stuff. So now if you go to Hampi, it's all a ruin, although it's a huge area. So this is Tungabhadra, and we have a sacred center and we have a royal center. And there are broken walls all around. Initially there were 7 layers of walls, 7 concentric walls. And there are other large temples here and there. But these are the main 2 areas. When we go to see Hampi, we will cover this in one day and maybe this on the second day, and maybe these and some of the hill areas, and there is a fort here also on the 3rd day. So this actually is the enlarged portion of the sacred center, and this is the royal center, enlarged version of the royal center. So you can see how the buildings are. Most of them are broken down. Most of them are actually in ruins now. So this is the configuration, this is the contour. The main study, the credit of main study of Hampi goes to Mulkraj Anand, the editor of Magh. Mulkraj Anand actually convinced George Mitchell and a team of architecture students from India and Australia to come and do measured drawings. Incredible amount of drawings, perfect drawings were made. And some conjectural views were constructed through the computer that if you have a broken temple, what could have been, because you know the grammar. Because Vijayanagara temples were absolutely grammatical as per Artha Shastra and Shilpa Shastra. So one could theoretically reconstruct what could have been. So those are also very interesting drawings to see. A team of international researchers have been studying the art and architecture of Hampi from 1980, and different teams have studied different things. Somebody studied the shrines in and around the village, then Alexander Mack studied the layout of the monuments, and C.S. Patil, who was the director of archaeology, studied the excavated palaces. And then finally, they could reconstruct some of the plans which are like this. There are 2 major temples in Hampi to see. One is the Virupaksha temple, which has the largest Gopuram. The tall structure that we see in all photographs is the Gopuram, not the temple. Temple is half broken. The Gopuram of Virupaksha temple. Virupaksha means Shiv. It was originally a Vishnu temple, they later converted as a Shiva temple. The other one is Vithala temple. The most beautiful work of art, architecture and sculpture is in Vithala temple, which is unparalleled in India. I'll just show you some photographs. If you look at Virupaksha temple, it's located in Hampi Bazaar. The small structures that you see, these are the bazaars, and these are some colonnaded halls, and there is a water body here, and these are the gates, and this is the temple. The Gopuram tower is about 150 feet tall, which means slightly less than our Chatterjee International Center. Enormous tower. Nothing to loot from there, so that is why it is still existing. The outer enclosure, which is in thick black line, contains memorial temples, all broken down, where the ceremonies and the funeral rites were performed. You could not perform a funeral rite inside the temples. So there were these small shrines constructed around the temple, main temple. This is the inside of Virupaksha temple. There are some columns which are very intricately carved, but not all of them. Most of the columns in Virupaksha temple are very simple, solid and structural. This is the temple, which is partly broken, as you can see, and one of the pillars that you can see one side is an example of a pillar of the Virupaksha temple. These are the shops and bazaars leading to the main Gopuram, which is this. This is the tallest structure visible from everywhere around. These are the columns I am talking about. And this is the lake which we saw on the left hand side. There are some submerged temples which are permanently waterlogged. And the Nandi bowl or the Shivling that we have inside, mind you, these are done from a single piece of stone. How they did it is anybody's guess. I'm sharing this photograph with you just so that you understand the scale. This is a monolithic Ganesh. This is also huge, partly demolished. This is a Krishna temple. All these are within the sacred center. This is a plan of the Krishna temple. Again, you see a solid wall all around, which is completely broken, and the columns are very solid and intricately carved like this. Some of these columns are musical columns, although the guides will request you not to play anything there, because it's our sweat actually destroys the stone. This is something that I show everybody because this is something which should not be done. This was the original sculpture of Narasimha. Again, a huge monolithic sculpture made from one single rock. This photograph was taken in 1868. Till about 1970, it was like this. When Archaeological Survey decided they will restore it. In the name of restoration, they have added this ribbon which should not be done. This is very silly, and structurally it is possible to restore without this band. When we go and see this, everybody comments, especially the foreign tourists, they always comment that why is this done? Was this original? I have no answer. This is the monolithic Nandi bull. There is another bull in one of the submerged temples. This is the Kodanda Rama temple, which is more or less all right, not much demolished, but top portion is completely gone. These are the musical columns. This is the top view of the temple. You can see that most of it is demolished. The roof is missing here, and unless in the restoration process the roof is covered up, some amount of deterioration continues. This is the Gopuram, also partly demolished. This is also, the top portion is completely gone. I don't know whether this is true or not, but there is a Sugriva's cave. There is a book written by two now well-known authors called On the Footsteps of Rama, and he traces that when Rama went to Vanavas, which route did he take from Ayodhya? And apparently he went through this area. This was apparently Kishkinda, where he meets Bali and Sugriv. So in the local folklore, they always talk about Bali and Sugriv. And they say that this was Sugriv's cave. Nobody knows whether it's true. In front of the cave, there are marks like this, but this could have been created by anyone. This is the temple district of Vithalapura, and this is the most intricate and one of the best preserved areas of Hampi, although the top portion of the chariot is gone completely. This is the plan. One reason why most of the temples are destroyed is, in Vijayanagara they used to construct the foundation and the basement and the ground floor up to plinth maybe with stone. The top portion of all the palaces and most of the structures were all wooden. So when they set fire to all the structures, the top portions were all vanished in a week's time. And actually, if you see the marks left on the stones, in some of the stones, the black soot marks are still there because the stones are porous and you cannot really take them off without damaging the stone. These are the columns of Vithala temple. The structure and ornamentation on the temple is very interesting because when you want to support a temple or a large roof, there is a certain design requirement, structural design requirement of the column in order to support the roof. So when they did the sculptures, they took everything into account. As a result, I mean, this is really unbelievable when you try to think how the calculation was done. And in Vithala temple, all sets of columns are different. Normally in a temple, you see in a particular area, all the columns are of same shape and size because they are withholding the same roof, the same weight, which has to be transferred to the ground. But here, they somehow achieve that, maybe because the foundation of stone, but even then it required enormous amount of courage and dexterity and skill to be able to design columns like this. Where this column, this set of column is different from this, and this is different from that, and that is different from this. So you don't visualize them as column, you visualize them as part of the wall or part of the ornamentation. The heaviness has been taken away. It almost gives you a feeling of wooden columns. It's so thin and delicate. And some of them are supporting roofs like this, and it's not coming out properly in the slide, but these are extremely ornate stone carved columns. And again, if you go further inside, you will see that all the columns are different. Now, when archaeological survey is restoring, these days, we have technology so that you don't have to suddenly construct a stone brick or a brick wall like this. It is ridiculous, but this goes on in India. This is almost the original structure of the chariot, which had a roof like this. By 1970, it was gone. Through computer, it is possible to generate an image to understand what it was like. This is a Hazara Rama temple. This is also designed by Gediyar Krishna Deva Rao. This is one of the great ornate temples that he constructed. The plinths are very interesting. Hazara Rama actually sounds like they have 1,000 Ram, but actually not so. In the later period of Vijayanagar, the kings all came from Andhra, so they were Telugu speaking. And what they created was a very prominent plinth around all the temples, where it contains maybe the world's first comic strip, the story of Ramayana, graphically shown through sculptures. So in one sculpture you see Valmiki narrating Ramayana. The next one you see how Dasharath actually conducts a puja, asking for son, and then Ram going to Vanvas and stuff like that. It goes on and on. So in each square there is a different story, different incident. So if you collect them together, it reads like a comic strip. This is the comic strip on Hazara Rama temple. This is the elevation and the drawing. You can see that there is a very prominent plinth here. And And this is the boundary wall, very thick wall, so therefore a lot of ornamentation could be done, the relief work on the plinth. And these are all conjectural because now we know how it could have been constructed. This is the situation now. This is the Royal Center. This is a 100-column wall. But if you look at the shape of the column, they are very simple and very structural. They look like columns, they look like supporting members, but not what we see in Vitala temple. These are the plinths. Every plinth is, decorated. They have relief work telling you a story. So earliest form of Amar Chitrakatha. This is again a ruined platform. Fortunately, nothing to steal from the platform, so the relief work is all there. There are large number of step tanks. Some of them are being excavated now. They have been excavated in the last 10 years. This is a royal bath. This clearly has Muslim influence because they allowed all the religion to flourish there. They also allowed the Muslim workers to come and construct some of the buildings. In fact, some of the Portuguese soldiers came and fought with Krishnadeva Rao, and they were sort of rewarded. And Krishnadeva Rao actually had a system that he was the Raja. So the highest form of honor a Raja can give to a soldier is when Raja is having pan. To share a pan with a soldier was the highest form of honor. So he shared his pan with most of the Portuguese soldiers, and they were very happy. They were related. They could not think that a king who's already paying them money to fight with him will also honor them in his court. The roof is completely gone of this octagonal bath. This is another underground Shiva temple where you can see the bull. The bull is in profile here, and this is the bull. This is huge in proportion, by the way. This is the vaulted structure. This was actually the stable, the horse and elephant. Stables made for horses and elephants. Lotus Mahal, influenced by Islamic architecture. In Lotus Mahal, the relief work is not so integrated. This is done through stucco, and stucco is easier. Stucco is made with stone dust, jaggery, fenugreek, and many other vegetable dyes and chemicals made from stones and vegetables. And then you made it into a paste, and then you can sculpt it any way you want. So although these are very intricate works, this is easier than sculpting in stone. The watchtowers are close to the bath area. One of the elephant statue, the trunk has been broken. This is Partha temple, and these are the books that I have consulted. Hampi by Subhadra Sengupta. Subhadra Sengupta is a very well-known historian. And Vijayanagara by S.R. Ramanujan. He gets carried away at times, so you have to really edit. Splendors of Vijayanagara Emperor Hampi, Mark publication. There are two publications. The second is New Light on Hampi, which is a later publication. And In the Footsteps of Rama by Vikrant Pandey and Nilesh Kulkarni. Now if you want to visit Hampi, this is a map of how we can see all the temples. Ideally, it should be a 3 to 4 day visit, and there are so many things to see. So I just thought I'll present this to you that tentatively 15th March was the day. It can't be because we have already, framed up other programs, so it can't be this March. So Kolkata, Bangalore flight will be around 6 to 7,000. Then we'll go from Bangalore to Hampi by car. So I'm assuming 3 persons in a car. So 13,000 divided by 3, so 4,455 per person. We'll carry some packed dry snacks on the way to Hampi and back. So that's 1,000. We'll provide one toilet break every 3 hours. So within 6 hours we'll be in Hampi. tourist taxi charge for going around Hampi will be like this, so about 3,000 per person. And this is the return flight. Hotels, we have many choices, but I would suggest the Karnataka Tourism Hotel, which is inside Hampi. Those of you who have been to Hampi will know that this is a reasonable hotel, but the walking is less. So tentative budget is 40,000 plus. Charges for food, travel and local guide will be extra. So we now have to decide on a date so this can be finalized. I am open to any questions. Yes. You know, many of the sites, including Nalanda, they say that it is not even 50% complete. There are many sites in India where nothing is done. Look at our Chandrakati Road, not even 5% has been done. Yes, government of Karnataka is very serious about Hampi. Yes, they will not allow you to go down. In our country, they don't have boardwalks. Like if you go abroad in Italy and Greece, they have boardwalks. So you can actually walk on top of the excavated ruins and see what is down there. So in our country, we still don't have the concept of boardwalk. I am from West Bengal Heritage Commission. I am trying to create some in some of our excavations in Mogulmari and Jagjivanpur, all the Buddhist universities that we have excavated. Let's see.
Well, all the five
stolen from these sites.
Oh, of course. When I went to Khajuraho, you know, ASI has given a perimeter, created a perimeter and a fencing all around. But beyond the fencing, there are a large number of stones. So I asked the guide, what happens to them? He said, yeah, we sell them.
So, you know, we went to the Philadelphia Museum of Modern Art, Philadelphia Art Museum.
Yes, yes.
The entire Indian temple is inside.
Also, no, in Philadelphia you will also see, in Boston also you will see, when Aswan Dam was being built, Nasser was the president. He floated an international request that when we build the Aswan Dam, 5 of our internationally known temples will be completely gone below water. So we request you to take them away. Boston has one of them, completely rebuilt.
Well, all the five states which form the conglomerate were all the Muslim states or some were Hindu?
No, the last 5 states, they were all Muslim, yes.
All
Bidar, Ahmednagar, Golconda, they were Muslims.
The construction of Vijayanagar, all the structures, dominantly would be what? Rock? Granite or granite?
Basalt, yes.
Basalt. Is there evidence of lime mortar? এটাকে আমরা সুরকি
You see, like I said, the foundation and the plinth was with rock. And some of the structures are made completely with rock.
Okay.
But they were set in lime mortar. And whatever was constructed on top with brick and wood, they are all gone. They have all burned up. Easy to destroy. That's why in the east we don't have most of our ancient townships.
Sir, thank you for this lovely session, sir. So my wife and I visited Hampi last year, and if
you deem fit, you may add 2 places.
one of the Hampi Island
Which is now back
Yes,
from
yes.
it, they moved to Anegondi.
In fact, in my program, detailed program, you can have breakfast in the Hippie Island.
And so, secondly, one temple is equivalent to Virupakho and Vitala, which we've missed, is Achuttaraya, sir.
Yes.
And that was a prostitution area, a red light area, so it was away from the town. and there's no road, you have to walk across the river. If you can add that also, because that architecture there is like Khajuraho and equally splendid.
Oh, I don't know about that. Okay, I'll add that.
Achuttiraya, sir, you've seen the Hampi Bazaar, sir. You have the Matanga Hill. You walk across the Matanga Hill, 15 minutes walk. You have a half a kilometer road called the Kotson Road, where all the women used to entice men, the rich men and all. And behind that is the third biggest temple of Hampi called Achuttiraya, sir.
I know about Achuttiraya, yes.
Sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
But there's you're talking about the ASI's tampering with without guidelines. Is that rampant? Because
all over India.
We've seen it happening in Cambodia as well, where when they were doing a restoration of part of Angkor Wat, Julie and I were there. They did some good work, but then suddenly things got politicized, and Prince Sihanouk gave an interview to a French newspaper to say that they've ruined everything. He said, when I went there, I was crying, I couldn't see it. I don't know, they used concrete, I don't know what they used.
It's partly true. I'll tell you the story of Angkor Wat. You know, when nobody would go to Angkor Wat, these were the Khmer Rouge days. Then the government of India agreed to go. The government of India sent a team from ASI who, within their knowledge, started so-called restoration. Now, when the Khmer Rouge regime was not there, then the government contacted 6 countries: France, Sweden, Australia, yes, Japan, and 2 more. They have stationed their team, they are restoring it, and ASI was told that you have sort of they started restoring without a complete survey. For instance, if a plinth was going down, they put cement and that was made permanent. Now to restore it, you have to demolish a huge area. So if you remember the tar prom complex, which is full of those trees, python-like branches. So they are custodian of only one temple, which is tar prom, and they have been told, there's a placard outside, there's a sign, that they are not to restore, just be the custodian and cut down any trees which are going to fall on the temple. That's it. All the other countries, 6 countries, they are restoring. They have made a museum of how the restoration is being done within the site, which is amazing. And ASI actually should go and learn. There's nothing wrong in learning. It became a National Geographic story, what ASI is doing.
Partha, I just wanted to jump in here before I have the privilege of giving the vote of thanks for this wonderful talk. That your talk literally made me walk through the 12 years that Harish and I spent researching for our books on the art, culture and architecture of Cambodia. And not just Taprom, but those of us, I think many of us have visited the Angkor Wat complex, will know that in Angkor Wat itself, what is known as the Western Gallery, the Samudra Manthan Gallery, is the one that has been the great center of controversy, because the Prince King Sihanouk took it up on himself to put a serious complaint with the UNESCO because of how I think Professor Narasimhaya of the ASI had tried to reconstruct. It's a thankless job because you can't really please every single expert in the field, but you will know this story better than any of us in your field. So if are there any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I would really appreciate if you tell us a bit about the West Bengal Heritage Foundation, a bit of
Commission,
sorry. For us, a bit of awareness raising, and if there are places that the Heritage Commission would recommend for people in West Bengal to visit within West Bengal, please.
West Bengal Heritage Commission is set up by the Information and Cultural Affairs, INCA department. We are under the INCA, and unfortunately we do not have any funds like we used to 8 years ago. So we cannot actually take up any restoration work. We only recommend, and we select heritage buildings and give them a tag, which I personally believe is not enough unless we have funds to restore. We have excavated a large number of sites. I would suggest you should visit Mogulmari in Midnapur, which is close to Daton, where a part of excavation we have gone down 13 feet below ground, and it's like a Buddhist monastery. And I'm sure if the excavation is complete, there will be a huge monastery, something similar to, not maybe as large as Nalanda, but something similar to that. The second site is Jagjivanpur in Mada, again a Buddhist site. If you go to the State Archaeological Museum in Bihala, where our main office is, number 1 SN Roy Road, you will see a model has been made of that excavation. You can see it's fairly large, and I can say that the excavation is not yet complete. These two sites you can see. The other place to see is a village called Dharnopuria near Boshirhat. Dharnopuria is known as a village of palaces. During the British time, there are 4 families, Goi, Sheth, Saha and somebody else. They started trading in jute and made enormous amount of money. So much so that during the freedom movement, when the freedom fighters wanted money from them or wanted to use some of their properties, they have a huge number of Malaysian properties. They flatly refuse, saying that we are close to the British, we will not help you. And those palaces are there, descendants are there in most of the buildings, wonderful buildings. One belongs to Visible Heritage Commission. We are trying to restore it, but exquisite work, and I hope we have funds to restore it. Pradeep.
What is the reason beyond the funds? What changed over the 8 years? And secondly, a long time ago, the proposal had been made of using a lottery for heritage conservation. Why was the lottery idea not reversed?
I don't know, but I can tell you about the funds. 15 years ago, Ministry of Culture at Delhi, they had a system of providing funds to all the states. We had to prepare a report where we would ask for funds for restoration of various properties, and they would send us 8 crore, 10 crore, at times they had sent us 100 crore also. But the current government at the center discontinued that completely.
I think we've had quite fulfilling evening. Thank you for your questions and your interest. I'd like to say that honestly, for a scholar who has worked across disciplines, as you can see, Partha Das to me would be a dream professor. But that's an alternative profession for another lifetime maybe. Innovative, very inventive, the way he wove the stories about the conflicts between religious communities, the importance of kingship and how that was negotiated, the importance of the South-North alliances and breakages. No wonder Hampi was the center, Vijayanagar, the victory city that Salman Rushdie spoke about in his newest novel, which I think the Bengal Club was happy to discuss. We have many members of the Bengal Club Book Club Committee, of which the subcommittee head is the gentleman who's been speaking to you this evening. So I can cut the evening short and make it pithy and leave you with impressions of what a wonderful exposition we have had on Hampi. And we hope you will join the very well explicated trip that Mr. Partha Ranjan Das will be taking us on at a later date. Thank you, Partha, that was wonderful. It would be a great pleasure to felicitate Partha, our librarian of nearly 20 years with the library, Shebontu Sengupto, Thank you so much. Thank you.